The diplomatic shuttle Voss 7 touched down on the obsidian landing pad of the Kathrani flagship with a hiss of stabilizing thrusters. Darien Voss stepped out first, as he always did, boots clicking against the polished black floor. He was the lead human envoy for the Soul Accord, a man whose resume read like a list of things other people were afraid to do: 3 tours in orbital conflict zones, a black belt he never bragged about, and a reputation among his own colleagues for being unervingly calm in rooms full of things that wanted him dead. Commander Zyrex of the Kathrani Dominion watched the human disembark with the practiced patience of a species that had conquered 4 star systems without losing a single fleet engagement. Zyrex stood nearly 7 feet tall, his chitness plating a deep violet that shimmered faintly under the ship's lights, his 4 eyes tracking Darien's every movement with clinical precision. To Zyrex, humans were an interesting anomaly, soft-bodied, slow, and statistically the weakest spacefaring species the Dominion had catalogued in the last 2,000 years. That was about to change. Envoy Voss, Zyrex said, his translator crackling slightly with the alien cadence beneath it. The Dominion welcomes you to discuss terms of cohabitation in the Theta Corridor. Darien smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Commander. Let's talk. The negotiation chamber was a wide, circular room lined with screens displaying star charts of contested space. A dozen Kathrani officers stood at the periphery, along with 2 other alien delegations, the insectoid Mireth, all twitching antennae and nervous energy, and the slow-moving, crystalline old Tethu, who communicated mostly through low harmonic tones. Humanity's allies, present mostly as a formality, since everyone in the room knew the Dominion had no intention of giving up the corridor peacefully. The talks went exactly as Darien expected. Zyrex postured. The Dominion's senior tactician, a broad-shouldered officer named Kor, made not-so-veiled threats about fleet superiority. The Mireth ambassador wrung her hands. The Tethu hummed something that the translator rendered, unhelpfully, as concern. And then, predictably, things got ugly. It started with Kor. The tactician had grown tired of diplomatic theater. He rose from his seat, plating flaring along his shoulders in a display of aggression that every species in the room recognized instinctively, and slammed a clawed hand on the table. The humans negotiate as though they hold leverage, Kor snarled, voice translating into flat, mechanical English. You have no fleet in this sector. You have no defense. You have nothing but words. Darien didn't even blink. We have something better than a fleet, Kor. We have patience. You're testing it. Kor's mandibles clicked together, a Kathrani laugh, mocking and sharp. Patience does not stop a blade, human. He moved fast. Faster than anything in the room expected a being his size to move. His hand swept beneath the table and came up holding a ceremonial dagger. Dominion military officers carried them as a mark of rank, edges kept honed sharp enough to split atmosphere-sealing membranes in a single strike. It wasn't supposed to be drawn in a diplomatic session. It was a message, a threat, an act of intimidation meant to make the soft, slow human flinch. He flicked his wrist and threw it. Not at Darien's chest. Kathrani protocol forbade lethal violence during active negotiations, even from a hot-tempered tactician, but close. Close enough to make the human jump. Close enough to humiliate him in front of the room. The blade spun through the air in a silver arc, whistling, aimed to pass a hair's width from Darien's ear and bury itself in the wall behind him. It never got there. Darien's hand came up almost lazily, fingers parting the air at exactly the right moment. The dagger smacked into his palm with a sound like a gunshot, and his fingers closed around the hilt before momentum could even finish dissipating. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply stood there, dagger held loosely in his grip, expression unreadable, as if catching a blade thrown at combat velocity were no more remarkable than catching a tossed set of keys. The room went silent. Every Kathrani officer froze mid-motion. The Mireth ambassador's antennae stopped twitching entirely. Even the Tethu's low hum cut off mid-note, an unnatural silence from a species that communicated constantly through sound. Commander Zyrex's 4 eyes were locked on Darian's hand. On the blade. On the utter absence of fear in the human's posture. He ran the numbers instinctively, the way any tactical officer would. Kathrani reaction speed had been measured at roughly 0.18 standard seconds for a trained soldier. The dagger had been thrown at close to 40 meters per second from less than 2 meters away. By every metric the Dominion's own combat academies taught, that throw should have been unstoppable to anything without sensor-assisted reflexes. A baseline, unaugmented human had simply plucked it out of the air like it was nothing. "Core," Zyrex said quietly, his translator flattening the sudden edge in his voice, "stand down." Core didn't move, frozen in the same stunned silence as everyone else. Darian turned the dagger over once in his hand, examining the edge with the mild curiosity of someone inspecting a kitchen knife. Then he set it down on the table, point first, where it stood upright and quivering slightly from the impact. "Nice blade," Darian said. "Dominion forgework, I'm guessing. Good balance." Silence. "You were saying something about leverage, Core?" Darian continued, voice calm, almost friendly. "I'm listening." Core said nothing. His plating, flared moments ago in aggressive display, had folded flat against his body, the Kathrani equivalent of a cold sweat. Zyrex stepped forward, motioning for his subordinate to retreat to the wall. The commander's mind was already working through implications, the way it had been trained to for decades. If this single envoy, not a soldier, not an augmented operative, but a diplomat, could intercept a thrown blade without augmentation, without warning, without so much as raising his heart rate, what did that mean for the humans the Dominion had dismissed as soft and slow for the last 50 years of first contact? What did it mean for the soldiers humanity did train for war? "Envoy Voss," Zyrex said, choosing his words with far more care than he had moments before. "I believe Officer Core's action was unauthorized. The Dominion extends its apologies." Darian inclined his head slightly. "Apology accepted, Commander. Let's get back to the Theta corridor, shall we?" "I believe you were about to make a generous concession." There was no concession ready. There hadn't been, 5 minutes ago. But something in the room had shifted, and every Kathrani officer present felt it, a recalibration of threat assessment running through their collective minds like a fire alarm. Zyrex looked at the dagger still standing upright on the table, at the human who had caught it without so much as adjusting his footing, and made a decision that would ripple through Dominion command for the next decade. "The Dominion," Zyrex said slowly, "is prepared to discuss a revised border, favoring sole accord interests in sectors 12 through 19. The Mareth ambassador's antennae twitched rapidly, the alien equivalent of a held breath being released. The Tethu resumed its low hum, now carrying a note that, if the translators were to be believed, sounded distinctly like relief. Darian simply nodded, as though this were the outcome he'd expected all along. "Reasonable. Let's get the paperwork started." Later, in the privacy of his own quarters aboard the flagship, Commander Zyrex reviewed the footage of the incident 11 times. Each time, he watched the dagger leave Core's hand. Each time, he watched the human's fingers close around it with no visible effort, no augmentation flagged on any scanner, no preparation, no fear. He filed a report to Dominion High Command that night. Its closing line would later be quoted, redacted and unredacted, across a dozen species military academies for years to come. Reassess all combat doctrine regarding Homo sapiens. If their diplomats can do this, we do not want to learn what their soldiers can do.